We chose to evaluate babies per woman compared to income levels. Before we take a look at the correlation between the two, let us state our hypothesis. We believe that over time, as incomes rise, babies per woman will fall. In order to properly explain our hypothesis, we must understand the reasons behind incomes rising.
Two main factors are higher rates of education and more opportunities for women. A rise in education over time will increase incomes as people have better skills and demand greater wages. Education also provides younger men and women the downsides to sexual activity and allows them to make more informed decisions with their lives.
Lastly, we see that the higher amount of salaried employed women, the higher the income. Furthermore, employment for women has also increased, which in turns their focus away from family and towards their jobs, leading to fewer babies.
So now let's look at what actually happens to babies per woman as incomes rise. Beginning in the late 19th century, we start to see a negative correlation form. As incomes rise, babies per woman falls. Again, some factors here are the increase in education and job opportunities for women, as well as the rise in wages and beginnings of minimum wage across the world.
A direct reason for having fewer babies with greater income is that families no longer need the money kids could provide as workers. Despite the overall trend, there are still some clear fluctuations, which we will explain next. Let's take a look at three developed nations that all follow a similar yet different track: the United States, Germany, and Japan. The United States shows us the trend immediately. Incomes are steadily rising and babies per woman is steadily decreasing. Germany, however, experiences slight fluctuation through the mid-19th century, but with the factory system and German cars developing in Germany towards the turn of the century, Germany begins to follow the same trend as the United States.
Japan experiences rapid fluctuations up until the 1950s. Possible reasoning behind this is that Japan was under dictatorship until the end of World War II. The graph shows that despite their rise in incomes occurring later than US and Germany, they have caught up and are now close to the same income level. This can be explained by the follower effect, which states that rapid growth occurs in countries that just adapt new technologies rather than spend time on research and development.
Now, a closer look at the United States. As stated earlier, the United States experiences relatively stable growth, but there are some key fluctuations. The first fluctuation occurs in 1930, with incomes dropping from $11.3 thousand to $7.7 thousand. This can be explained by the Great Depression, the worst depression America has ever faced. The Great Depression was caused by a stock market crash and the failure of American banks. These failures left Americans without their savings and under extreme losses from the stock market. Following the Great Depression, we see incomes rapidly increase and take a step back throughout the early to mid 1940s. America rapidly ramped up production during World War II, causing the incomes to quickly increase, then needed to demobilize following the conclusion of World War II, causing the slight decrease in incomes.
Immediately following World War II, we can see a sharp spike in babies per woman. The baby boomers can explain this fluctuation. Following victory in World War II, families were now hopeful for the future. This newfound hope led more couples getting married and having kids. Throughout the 60s and 70s, we see a decline in babies per woman. The effects of the baby boom are now gone, and contraception is now becoming more and more socially acceptable. The birth control pill gains trust and prominence and is finally legalized in the 70s. Through the 80s and into the present day, babies per woman remains the same, but incomes are slowly but steadily rising.
Now, let's look at a country that experiences a notable decrease in income and a decrease in babies per woman. Ukraine is one country that stands out here. Ukraine had steady growth in income through most of the 20th century, aside from dips during the World Wars. However, in the 90s, Ukraine's income level slid from about 10,000 to 4,000. What is peculiar about this movement is that the number of babies per woman also decreased. There are some explanations.
First, Ukraine gained its independence from the Soviet Union in 1990. Ukraine had traditionally been an agrarian economy, but Stalinist policies in the world wars destroyed any hopes of continuing their agrarian ways. Additionally, Ukraine was very dependent on the Soviet Union for cheap oil and gas. However, that ended following Ukraine's independence. Furthermore, the Ukraine government was very disorganized and set up a socialist regime. With no agrarian economy to fall back on, no cheap oil and gas, and disorganized government policy, the economy plummeted. Lastly, the lack of babies can be explained by the fearful expectations of the future. With a disorganized government, a country divided between the Eastern Russian community and the Western native Ukraine community, It is understandable that families were reluctant to bring kids into the world.